Welcome to the Chinese Grand Prix driver ratings. A bit of a boring weekend now I look back on it, to be honest with you. It's more exciting once the race has been finished than the actual race itself. It was shaping up to be an interesting race with the first dry one of the season. Of course, only week 2, but Australia was wet and we were wondering heading into this weekend, were McLaren truly the quickest? Do they really have a significant advantage over the rest of the field? And well, quite evidently they do. But it was still great to see a high moment for Lewis Hamilton winning the sprint race and qualifying on pole in the Ferrari. But very contrasting feelings with a poor Sunday and then subsequently being disqualified alongside his teammate Charles Leclerc. Oh my God, Ferrari, what are you doing? I mean, first the strategy call. And now this, yeah, not a great start to the season for Ferrari. So, let's get into our driver ratings for the Chinese Grand Prix, shall we? We are rating them on their sprint quality performance, their sprint race, qualifying, and the race today. So, yes, 4 sessions to rate the drivers on, because some had good Saturdays and then had poor Sundays and vice versa. So, let's get into it. So, let's start with the first of the disqualifications, Lewis Hamilton. What a weekend it was for him. A very up and down weekend. And for me, I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10 because I do think that sprint quali pole and the sprint race itself was very well managed. That was Lewis Hamilton of old that we're so familiar in seeing for so many years, and it was great to see him win his first race. Even if it is a sprint race, you still have to win, you still have to get the job done, and everyone still wants to pick up those important 8 points that he did by winning and leading from start to finish. That was such a high for him, and I think even with the unfortunate disqualification and the lack of performance the Ferrari had in qualifying on the Sunday and the race today, I think he'll still look at that as a very high moment, but it is no doubt overshadowed by this disqualification with the 2 worn down skid plates. So that's the wooden plank that you see underneath the car. It is like a special kind of laminated wooden plank. It's there for health and safety reasons. You're not allowed to wear that plank down below its tolerance, which is 9mm, I think it is, and Lewis was like 8.4, something like down to 8.4. So you're talking the smallest of margins, but it's black and white. You're either within tolerance or you are over that tolerance, and Lewis was over it. And yeah, Ferrari making some set of changes from the Saturday to Sunday that just has come to bite them on the behind. An issue for Ferrari, because the more you raise the ride height in these cars, in the ground effect era cars, the more performance you lose. So they want to run the car as low as possible, but clearly been caught out, and yeah, a real shame for him. But the race definitely wasn't as good as it was for the Saturday. Seemed to be that, yeah, those changes that they made, not only did it result in a disqualification, it also resulted in a lack of performance in that Ferrari. But because of how good he was on the Saturday, and he scored 8 points there and won in that fashion, I am giving him an 8 out of 10, even if it is a disqualification. I'm measuring not the result, I'm measuring the driver's performance over the duration of the weekends. So, yeah, that's it for Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton has a split vote, but wait until you see what split it is. It's a 5 out of 10 and an 8 out of 10. How have you guys given Lewis Hamilton a 5 out of 10 for that performance on the Saturday alone? I get the race was a little bit below par, but still, that Saturday performance should have been worth a few extra points. So, tad harsh. You guys are harsh. You'll find out, you'll see in the ratings this week that, yeah, I think you guys have been a tad harsh. Charles Leclerc, 6 out of 10 for me. Another middle of the road weekend for him, a pretty meh weekend, to be honest. And I maybe could score him a bit lower if it wasn't maybe for his race performance on the Sunday and pushing for a podium for at least a brief period of time, and then he got caught by Max Verstappen, who managed his tyres perfectly compared to Leclerc. Now, of course, we know he got disqualified for being underweight, but yeah, up until that race, even the start of the race, very lucky not to give Lewis Hamilton a puncture. I know, obviously, it can't get much worse than a disqualification, but I think giving your own teammate a puncture and potentially putting him to the back of the grid and no hope of scoring points in that race at all is maybe worse, let alone in the second race weekend of Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari career, and after he's just won the sprint race from that massive high the day before. So yeah, could have been so much worse for Charles Leclerc, I think, at the start of the race. And look, that front wing damage, I do actually think it made him quicker. I do think that maybe while it in the long run maybe hurt his tyres more, but there was clearly something not right with that Ferrari, the way it was set up, hence why they got disqualified with the plank wear on Lewis's car. Wouldn't surprise me, even though Charles didn't get disqualified for that reason, his plank was also very much on the limit as well. And Fred Vasseur even kind of confirmed that and said they're a bit baffled by how one car with damage to their front wing was performing better than the car who had the same setup. That's at least what was indicated by Fred Vasseur, that they both ran the same setup and obviously made changes from the sprint race. But yeah, while he says he weren't comfortable at Shanghai and it's not his strongest circuit, you still expect him to at least be level in performance with Lewis Hamilton in qualifying, but to get out qualified by him twice and then, yeah, to struggle to get past George Russell twice as well on the Saturday and the Sunday, just not really good enough from Charles, and we expect more. So, yeah. And you guys gave Charles Leclerc a 7 out of 10. Next is Pierre Gasly, and for me, it's also a 6 out of 10 because it seems that Alpine, they openly admitted that they were one of the teams affected by the technical directive of the flexible wing, and they had to make alterations to it. And I do wonder if Gasly was hampered by that and that affected the Alpine car over its single lap pace. Went out in Q1 both qualifying sessions, however, did make up five places and more in the full race, in the sprint race and the full race as well. But he has been disqualified for the same reason as Charles Leclerc. He is under the weight limit, so similar circumstances as not ensuring that they had enough provision there of weight within the car, fuel, etc., that they would be within the weight limit. And yeah, as mentioned with Lewis and these measurements, it's black and white. You're either within the weight limit or you're under. Simple as. There's no caveats. And yeah, looking much better in race trim, that Alpine, than it was in quali mode. And Gasly, I think, did the most that he probably could have got out of that Alpine, but it'll be also a weekend to forget for them. So, yeah, outperformed Jack Doohan for the most part, and I would say it was an okay driver performance for him this weekend, but because of those qualifying performances, it's a middle-of-the-road 6 for me. Pierre Gasly, another driver with a split vote here in the ratings this week, and you have split it between a 5 out of 10 and a 6 out of 10 for the Alpine driver. Next up is Fernando Alonso, our only DNF of the race on Sunday with that brake failure issue. Real shame for him, especially after what happened in Australia with him crashing out there. But for me, Fernando Alonso, I think it's a 4 out of 10. It's difficult, obviously, to assess his race today because he did such few laps. He did out-qualify Lance Stroll just for the race on the Sunday, but only just. And in the sprint quali and the sprint race, he was just outperformed by Lance Stroll. While they finished only a position apart, he finished 13 seconds behind his teammate Lance Stroll. And I feel like I can't really rate him for the amount of laps, the few amount of laps and showing that I saw of him for the race today, to be outperformed by Stroll like that in a sprint race and sprint quali is not something that I expect of Fernando Alonso, and I don't think he'll be too happy with. He needs to definitely pick up the pace, and I don't know, I feel like I can't give Fernando Alonso anything higher than a 5 when he's been so clearly outperformed by Stroll. So yeah, is Fernando Alonso just not interested in this season, or is age catching up to him? I don't know. Only Fernando Alonso will be able to tell you that. But yeah, he'll obviously be looking to do considerably better in Suzuka, a track that he's gone very well at before in the past. And there is a possibility of points being scored by that Aston Martin. It is not as bad as what we were all predicting at the start of the season. So there is still something for Alonso to fight for, but obviously with time running out for him, it's not what he wants to be fighting for. He wants to be at the front, fighting for race wins and fighting for podiums. But yeah, not a good start to the season for Fernando Alonso, and who knows what he maybe could have done in the race today. Stroll missed out on points, but yeah, improvements required from him. Quite a split vote for Fernando Alonso. You guys couldn't really decide, but you did just, and you gave him a 1 out of 10. I think that's a tad harsh for Fernando Alonso. I don't think it was quite that bad of a weekend, but you can see some of you thought it was a 4 out of 10, a 3 out of 10, and some of you even giving him a 7 out of 10. Not quite sure what performance you saw from Alonso this weekend. Next is Yuki Tsunoda. I have said a lot about Yuki Tsunoda already, and for me, it's a 10 out of 10. But he finished 19th, Scott. What the hell? Yes, he finished 19th. But just go check my recent video with a little rant about the RB strategy team, because I don't know what more a driver can do. Seriously. Yuki finished P6, the best of the rest in the sprint race. Unbelievable qualifying, unbelievable performance from him. And then it comes to qualifying again on the Sunday. Can he do it? Puts the car in Q3. Okay, out-qualified by his teammate Hadjar by 1 position, but very quickly gets that position from his teammate in the race on Sunday. He is cruising to a P7, best of the rest once again, ahead of Kimi Antonelli, has Ocon comfortably behind him. Lance Stroll's ahead of him, who is yet to make a pit stop, who's goal hanging for a safety car. P7 is nailed on. A good haul of points to round off what is a brilliant weekend. And they pit him. Another team that potentially committed to the 2-stop and they weren't committed to a 1-stop, and maybe they thought that, I don't know, they'd be underweight as well if they committed to the 1-stop, like Gasly and also Charles Leclerc. Haven't had confirmation of that yet. Maybe you guys can enlighten to me in the comments below. But I think it's a 10 out of 10 performance from him again. Second week in a row. What more can a driver do? Now, the front wing damage that he received after he'd made that pit stop was unfortunate. Apparently, a rock flew up and hit his front wing, which is why it was such a weird damage and why he was so shocked. Hang on, I've got front wing damage? I haven't even hit anyone. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not really going to judge Yuki and rate his score down because of what happened after the pit stop. Because, I mean, how are you supposed to cope with the fact that you're in P7 cruising, or P8 at the time cruising, and then your team just pushes you back out of the points again? Yuki got 3 points for the sprint race. He should at least be on minimum like 15 points by now, and much, much higher in the championship standings. So yeah, a real shame for him. Of course, rumours that he's going to be already replacing Liam Lawson in that Red Bull second seat in Suzuka. I really hope he doesn't, because he's got good form in that RB at the moment. He seems to have it under control, and he is comfortably best of the rest. Sometimes Pippin Antonelli going to Suzuka could be a horror show for him in that Red Bull. No doubt he'll back himself. But yeah, there's not much more a driver can do at the moment. Top performances from Yuki. Such a strong start to the year, and who knows what the future holds for him. Hopefully it's a lot more positive than the finishes we have seen in Australia and in China this time around. 19th position, man, for Yuki is just so not deserved, and does not show the full picture of his race today. And you guys gave Yuki Tsunoda a split vote between an 8 out of 10 and a 7 out of 10. Not sure how you've all come to that conclusion, guys, but hey-ho. Next up is Nico Hülkenberg, and for me, it is a 2 out of 10 for Nico Hülkenberg this weekend. One for him to forget. He finished P20 in the sprint race after not making it out of Q1, while his teammate Bortoleto did. So that's the second qualifying session in a row that he's been out-qualified by his teammate. And then the race on Sunday, had a tremendous qualifying. Qualified P12, something that I didn't think was possible in that Stake F1 car, even though we know how good Hulkenberg is. You're expecting him to at least maybe push for points or at least hold his own, especially with Ocon only a position ahead of him after the struggles of Haas the previous week as well. And he spun it at turn 3 on the first lap. Lost 7 positions, fell to the back of the pack. His teammate also spun as well on the first lap. And yeah, it was just a terrible performance from both of them, being finishing the last of the runners. And I don't think there's really, other than qualifying, any positives to take from it. It's only because that qualifying was so good that he scored an extra point to get a 2 out of 10. And you guys gave Nico Hulkenberg a 4 out of 10 in what was a very widely split vote. Gabriel Bortoleto, also a 2 out of 10 for me. And the only reason I'm giving him an extra point and not giving him a 1 out of 10 is because he outqualified his teammate in SQ1. He got that Stake F1 car into SQ2 again. We did see after the changes made on the Saturday what was possible with that Stake F1 with Hulkenberg getting into P12. So for him going out in Q1 wasn't particularly good. And then the races, like Hulkenberg, were shocking. He lost 4 positions in the first in the sprint race, ended up finishing down in 19th, and then the race itself spun on the first lap like his teammate and was just never at the races. So yeah, 2 out of 10 for him, and a weekend for Stake to forget for sure and move on to Suzuka. Gabriel Bortoleto, a split vote between a 5 out of 10 and a 3 out of 10. You skipped the 4 out of 10 pretty much all together there, guys. Jack Doohan now, and Jack Doohan, I feel like it's a 2 out of 10. I can't give him worse, I think, than the Stake F1 drivers, but I can't give him any more than that. While he completed the race, the whole weekend was just so messy for him. It could quite easily be a 1, but I feel like he showed kind of some racing chops this weekend. He wasn't actually in qualifying that far behind Pierre Gasly. You're talking like less than a 10th, but where he was unable to perform compared to Gasly was in the races, in the sprint race and the race on Sunday, where Gasly was able to make up multiple positions in race trim. Doohan didn't. And Doohan picked up a penalty for his troubles today with the forcing another driver off the track. He got a warning, I think it was, or he was investigated for moving under braking, and I think he probably should have got a warning for moving under braking. He was moving very late. And then on the sprint race as well, he sent Nico Hulkenberg around, I think it was, or Bortoleto. Maybe I'm mixing up the 2 different Stake F1 cars. Made contact with them there as well. Just a messy weekend for him. Of course, he'll be happy to get a race under his belt, but I don't know how many more opportunities he's got. Obviously, the clock is ticking for Doohan with, as I'm going to say every single race weekend, with Colapinto waiting in the wings. So, yeah, a 2 out of 10 for him. Will he be able to take some positives? The single lap pace and his fastest lap that he set in the race was a 1,000th of a second quicker than Pierre Gasly. So he does have some pace, Doohan, but he's messy with it. He needs to tidy it up because that's obviously what Gasly is able to achieve. But look, Gasly unfortunately disqualified, so Doohan does move up an extra position, but it doesn't matter when you're finishing way outside the points, and that is not what Flavio Briatore will be wanting. And you all gave Jack Doohan a 6 out of 10. Quite a high mark, I think, from you lot. Liam Lawson, 1 out of 10. And I'm not really going to elaborate much more on it because, look, it's another shocking race for him. And we've spoken to absolute death. I think the whole internet has spoken to absolute death about Liam Lawson. I'm personally on the consensus and the side of the car just isn't for him, and this is a pattern now, not a coincidence. And I think I will end this about Liam Lawson just saying it would be absolutely ridiculous to get rid of him after just 2 solitary races at 2 tracks he has never raced at before. Give him a few more opportunities at circuits he at least feels confident at, and yeah, who knows, from then on, if he's still poor, bring Yuki in, and then we'll probably see the same thing with him as well, unfortunately. So yeah, only way is up, I guess, for Lawson. It can't get much worse, can it? And you guys gave Liam Lawson an overwhelming 1 out of 10. Isack Hadjar, 7 out of 10 for Isack Hadjar. Of course, we know that he went out on the formation lap last week, but for me, it was a positive weekend for him. And the race today, he was on the receiving end of the poor strategy call as well. The 2-stop that the RB team clearly committed to, lost 7 positions in the race. Yes, he wasn't up to speed with Yuki, but he was fighting for points. He was fighting around for that last point scoring position in P10. And yeah, the qualifying was amazing. To out-qualify Yuki and to get it in Q3, what a performance. The sprint quali, yes, took him a bit of time to get up to speed. He at least made it through to Q2. And then the race, he did make up a couple of positions, at least, out on circuit. So yes, good to see Hadjar show his racing chops, show what he's capable of. And it's arguably, yeah, his first full race weekend because of what happened in Australia. And definitely something for him to build upon. A good showing from Hadjar, and I'm excited to see what more he will provide this season. And you gave Isack Hadjar a 5 out of 10. Carlos Sainz. Oh, he's struggling, isn't he? It's a 2 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz. And I could even give him a 1. But he crashed out last week, and I think that warrants a 1. That's the lowest score that I can possibly give anyone. We don't do zeros here. So a 2 out of 10. Because it's just not good enough. Simple as. He is evidently struggling, but you expect more from Carlos Sainz. And especially when you can see what Albon is doing with that Williams as well. He should be in Q3. The fact of that he struggled in both qualifying sessions and in both races. I mean, how he's managed to score a point, obviously it's due to 3 disqualifications ahead of him, but the fact of that he scored a point is not deserved at all, and he needs to do more. And he even said that on the radio afterwards, that they unlocked some performance in the car by changes they made over from Saturday to Sunday, or from the Saturday to the qualifying session. And yeah, he's not extracting the pace out of that car. He needs to do better. We expect more from him, especially when you compare how far he's being outperformed by Alex Albon. It's quite damning. But only 2 races into this season, so plenty of time for him to get up to speed. Unlike the likes of Lawson and other drivers up and down the grid, his seat is not going to be under threat anytime soon. That's for sure. And you guys gave Carlos Sainz a 5 out of 10. Lance Stroll. It's a 7 out of 10 for me, for Lance Stroll. I think he's had a solid weekend here at the Chinese Grand Prix. Somewhere where he's actually done okay in the past, when he's not driving into the back of people under safety car conditions, that is, if you remember last year on Daniel Ricciardo. But yeah, out-qualified Alonso. Looked like he had the pace on him throughout this weekend, other than eventually the Sunday, the Saturday qualifying for the race on Sunday. But very unfortunate to finish P9 and not get a point on the board in the sprint race. Comfortably had the pace over his teammate. He finished 13 seconds ahead of Alonso, and did well there and did more than what we expected in that Aston Martin. I still think that Aston Martin is struggling behind the Williams for sure and the RB car. So it's going to struggle to score points on the regular. And he went very long on the alternate strategy compared to his teammate on the hard compound. One of only 3 drivers to do so, Bearman and Lawson being the other 2 at the start of the race. Went very long on that first stint, hoping for a safety car, which unfortunately never arrived. And then looked strong on the medium in the second half of the race. But when you suspect that maybe there was going to be more deg in the hard tyre, the medium compound tyre wasn't really able to be used at its full potential, with a more of an offset probably predicted on the hard. So yeah, a solid performance by Lance Stroll this weekend, and well, is that confidence building? We will see. Can he continue that into Suzuka? Not long to find out. And you gave Stroll a 5 out of 10, but it was very close to a 7 out of 10. Ollie Bearman, it's an 8 out of 10 for me. What a weekend for Haas. Oh my goodness. Where did they turn up from? Because they were nowhere in Australia, even in dry conditions. It was, God knows what they've done in the past week to that Haas. But this is the Haas that I was expecting to turn up in Australia. This is the Haas I was expecting to, as a continuation of what we saw from 2024. And Ollie Bearman, a great qualifying in sprint quali to start off the weekend. Lost a few positions when it came to the actual race, but to start off the weekend with that qualifying raised a few eyebrows. And then the qualifying on Sunday was not that great. It wasn't great. He qualified down in 17th, but the race was so much better. Up 7 positions, finished in P10, has now been promoted a couple of extra positions due to the disqualifications of the Ferrari, and double points for Haas. He got very punchy and very racy, some good overtakes out on circuit, and I think overall, regardless of the qualifying, the overall result and the drive and the manner in which he was able to get himself up into P10, also starting on the alternate strategy on the hard compound and making that medium tyre work at the end, was impressive and very positive for Haas and what we expect from that driver pairing. So hopefully Ollie Bearman can kick on. And you fans gave Ollie Bearman a 6 out of 10. Alex Albon, it's a 7 out of 10 for me with Alex Albon, only because he was unable to hold on to his position in the sprint quali. He made it into Q3 both times. I think now we know that Williams should be making it into Q3 week in, week out. So is it really that impressive for him to make it into Q3, even though it's a second weekend? I don't think I can really score him too highly because we expect that now from the Williams. The first race, we were like, are they? Aren't they? But I expected him to be in Q3, and even Carlos Sainz. So I'm not going to overly score him higher because of that. At the sprint race, he lost 2 positions to the Aston Martins, so not overly ideal there for him. And would he have been able to score points? Maybe. I mean, he started P9, and maybe in that Williams he could have held on to those onto that P8. But because of that, and then the race on Sunday was a lot better from him. Qualifying in P10, Q3 again, and just a solid finish in P9. Never threatened Antonelli, and he was off the pace of Ocon and off the pace of Yuki Tsunoda as well. I think it's just, once again, a very solid weekend for Alex Albon and a great start to the year. Not an amazing weekend, but solid, and that's what he needs, and that's what Williams needs. So 7 is nothing to scoff at whatsoever for Alex. And you gave Alex Albon a 7 out of 10. Kimi Antonelli. It's a 6 out of 10 for Kimi Antonelli this weekend. Now, the reason why I've given him a 6 and not a 7 or anything higher, even though he was bizarrely, in my opinion, driver of the day in the fan vote, is because you look at where George is. I know he's not as experienced, but he came unstuck behind some lesser cars, behind Tsunoda, behind Esteban Ocon. He became stuck behind Tsunoda twice, actually, in the sprint race and the full race. And because of that, I'm not going to give him any higher. Not to say 6 isn't a solid weekend for him. It's solid. I mean, he's been promoted an extra 2 positions because of the Ferrari's disqualification. So he's finished P6 instead of P8 in the main race. Scored a good haul of points there. And kind of just quietly went about his business, similar to George Russell this weekend. Mercedes not really shouting from the rooftops about anything, not doing anything amazing or dramatic, and just picking up the points as they go. And for a rookie like Antonelli, and an 18-year-old like Antonelli is, Mercedes will be happy about that for definite. And if you're a Kimi Antonelli fan, you should be as well, because it's a solid start to his F1 career. Kimi Antonelli, driver of the day on Sunday, to his surprise, and it's a split vote, and you guys have given him a 6 and a 7 out of 10. Esteban Ocon. It's a 9 out of 10 for me. It's not quite a perfect score. It's not quite a perfect score because I do have to judge him for his sprint quali and his sprint race. Unable to make it out of Q1 in the sprint week and the sprint quali. And then it came to the sprint race and he only made up a couple of positions. But whatever Haas did between the sprint race and qualifying on Saturday, I mean, pat yourselves on the back because you unlocked some performance. Esteban Ocon qualifying in P11 after not even being able to get out of SQ1 and then to comfortably drive that car behind Yuki Tsunoda and then drive that car home on that one stop to the end and eventually bag extra 2 points and be given a top 5 is just tremendous. What a Sunday performance from him and, well, a Saturday afternoon performance. It's not quite a perfect score because of the sprint. If he'd got out into Q2 and had a solid performance in Q and finished like kind of towards the top 10 or around 13th or 12th in the sprint race, I would probably give him a 10 out of 10. But yeah, nonetheless, massive steps forward for Haas. That's what Ocon and what Haas would have been looking for when they signed Ocon. And yeah, excited to see Bearman and Ocon for the remainder of this season and see if they can kick on or whether or not they're going to be a team that just decides to turn up every other week. We will see. That's the way F1 seems to be going at the moment. I think we're in for just, yeah, other than maybe McLaren at the front, it's quite an unpredictable year already, even though we're 2 races in. And you all gave Esteban Ocon an 8 out of 10. Max Verstappen. It's a 9 out of 10 for Max Verstappen. Now, we know that Red Bull car is just not very nice to drive at the moment. Max is definitely getting the most out of that Red Bull car. And the reason it's not a 10 out of 10 is purely because he didn't finish on the podium on the Sunday. He made quite a fatal error, shall we say. It's a small mistake in the grand scheme of things, but it lost him 2 positions at the start of the race and then made it a lot more difficult for him to recover those positions later on. He did great in the second phase of that race, a second stint, managing that hard tyre perfectly and having enough tyre left to go on the attack, comfortably get Lewis Hamilton, comfortably get past Charles Leclerc. Yeah, it was very, very well driven from him in the second stage of that race. The Red Bull on the medium, which we saw degrade a lot quicker on everyone's cars compared to the hard tyre, really struggled. Of course, struggled to stay with Lewis on the Saturday and then lost that position to Oscar. And very rarely do we not see Max Verstappen fight hard for a position, but he knew he was a sitting duck, really, to that McLaren of Piastri. And it was, a simple overtake for him. But clever because he still picked up 3 points. And look, he's second in the championship, 2 race weekends in. This is what Max does. And yeah, if he finished on the podium on both sprint race and the race on Sunday, I think it would have been another 10 out of 10 for him like it was in Australia. So yeah, top grades again for Max, and wouldn't surprise me he digs out another result in Suzuka next time around. And you guys agree with me, you've given Max a 9 out of 10 quite overwhelmingly. George Russell. It's a 9 out of 10 for George Russell, a point higher than Max Verstappen, primarily because of him finishing on the podium in the full race. He finished behind Max, a position behind him in the sprint race. But I am very impressed by how George is just conducting himself at the moment. He's just quietly going about his business. Picked up points, a haul of points in the first 2 weekends. And if the McLaren start to trip up over each other, these points could be very important, and the way that he's driving at the moment, picking up these podiums, picking up these points, could be very important come the end of the year. And I don't think anyone expected George Russell to be fighting for a world championship. And I do think the way the first 2 weekends have gone, it's very premature because we have 22 race weekends remaining and 5 sprint races involved in that. It's a good start for him in Mercedes, especially a driver who doesn't have a contract heading into 2026. But yeah, he finished 5.5 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen. Doesn't have the pace of the McLarens. Yes, he had a great start on the Sunday, but Oscar Piastri cleverly squeezed him so that he had to get out of the throttle, and that allowed Lando Norris to swoop around the outside. He did undercut Norris, but Norris then regained the position. the McLarens are just kind of too quick at the moment. I don't think anyone can really cope with their pace. But yeah, I think overall a very, very solid weekend for him. Another 9 out of 10 like it was in Australia. And if he keeps doing this, he's definitely going to be one who could sneak the World Championship if the McLarens trip over each other, which we do expect them to do at least a couple of times this season. Another split vote. And for George Russell, it's a split between an 8 out of 10 and a 9 out of 10. Lando Norris, a 6 out of 10. I've been toying with this one, but I think his sprint performance was so poor, he can't be rated any higher than that. Now, he finished second, of course, and still on the podium in the race, but he never really looked like he was going to trouble Piastri. He looked like he got close, but then whenever he got into the dirty air, I think Piastri, just in that clean air, was managing the race very well and always had enough to respond to Norris. As we saw that gap increase a few times, every time Norris got close, Piastri then went, this is what I've got in my back pocket. And then, I mean, just the mistakes on the Saturday just weren't good enough, or the Friday afternoon even, with the sprint quali. The first mistake, locking up, costing him potentially pole position there, then losing 4 positions by a costly error of him just completely misjudging how wide his McLaren is. They're running onto the dirt, the literal dirt of the track. Just about recovered to a singular point, 8th place in the sprint. I mean, so poor. And then you expect him to respond and at least stick it on the front row in qualifying. Doesn't do that. He's on the second row. Yes, makes a good overtake, but then never troubles his teammate throughout the race. So for me, a 6 out of 10. And he needs to improve, doesn't he? He needs to improve. He's got a 10-point advantage over Piastri. Piastri is going to be very buoyant and very confident after his performance this weekend in both the sprint and the full race. So, yeah. Overall, one that Lando will probably want to forget about quickly this race weekend. And you've given Lando Norris a 8 out of 10. And lastly, Oscar Piastri. I am going to give Oscar a 10 out of 10 because I do think he responded very well to the low of Australia the week before. He only was just pipped to pole position. I mean, you're talking 0.08 of a second to Lewis Hamilton. Ended up qualifying P3 because Max was even closer to Lewis. Ended up taking that position from Max Verstappen, but struggled a little bit in the dirty air, and Lewis managed that race brilliantly. But important second place for him. And then qualifying on pole position and leading from start to finish. Always had enough pace in his back pocket. Managed the tyres perfectly. We have seen Piastri, his weakness in the past has been his tyre management. It has improved over his time in F1 over the last couple of years. But there's still that question mark. Now, the second stint, there wasn't much wear as Deg as expected on that hard compound tyre, but the medium stint, he was very good on and had Lando covered. And he had him covered for the rest of the race. And it was a very solid lights to checkered flag win. So, yeah, 10 out of 10 for Oscar, and he'll be very strong heading into Suzuka. And you guys gave Oscar Piastri an overwhelming 10 out of 10. So there we go, guys. Those are all my driver ratings. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree with them? It's all part of the fun when you come and tell me what I've got wrong. And it's interesting to see how we view these races very differently. But as always, results don't always paint the full picture of a driver's performance. I do think there's a few out there, their performance was a lot better than where they finished. 2 race weekends down now, and well, we have to wait another couple of weeks until we head to Suzuka. What is in store for us there? Who knows? Maybe some increment weather, as we always get in Suzuka. But yes, McLaren definitely looks strong, and it does look like at the moment it's going to be a championship battle between Norris and Piastri. But yeah, don't rule out the quiet Mercedes of George Russell. And as always, Max Verstappen, who is still picking up results in a car that is most definitely subpar. We'll see you for the next one, guys. Bye.